My name is Robbie Hurst. I'm an MEI out of North Texas Regional Airport, and today...
The best MEI at North Texas Regional
that's
Airport.
That's a pretty objective statement.
It's just true, but go ahead, continue.
Well, I'm honored to have my dad here. We're going to do a video. He's a 121 captain, lifetime airline guy, and I wanted to be able to
Not that we have any hints or anything like that, but I am kind of...
the blue guy.
The blue guy.
Your plane even shows it.
It sure does. I love the color. I love blue.
So, I wanted to do a conversation with you today. I know that you've had some pretty interesting moments in the cockpit.
I have had interesting moments in the cockpit. One or two.
So, why don't you tell us a little bit about what is going through your head whenever you're in an emergency situation, whether it's in general aviation all the way up to the 121 level?
Okay. Well, I mean, it's interesting because it's really a progression. You know, just like flying, your progression starts as a private pilot. You've got very little experience. Some people during that private pilot time have an emergency with their instructor or something that they have to walk through. So as you are walking through this experience of becoming an airline pilot, a corporate pilot, whatever your career track happens to be, you just start to build on your experience. Experience is everything.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So as things go on, you have a tendency in your first, if you will, we call them in the airline industry, we call them non-normal situations. We don't call them emergencies anymore. I wonder if the insurance companies have gotten involved in some of this, but really we call them non-normal actions now. And really, if you think about why they call them non-normal actions instead of emergencies, if you think emergency, you have a tendency to do what? You have a tendency to and you want to jump through hoops and you want to do things, and nothing we do at the airline level is done like that. Everything we do at that level is done with checklists. Everything done at that level, and the more severe the non-normal situation becomes, the more important it is to, I call it like getting into the metronome syndrome for me. If I have a non-normal that is an exciting non-normal, I try to get myself into a click, into a pattern where my mind slows down, where I start to think distinctly, and I start to get a bigger picture. In the airline industry, we have two people sitting next to each other all the time. And we have a flying pilot and a non-flying pilot. And a lot of times at the airline, it's far more beneficial for the captain, even if he was the flying pilot, to turn the aircraft over to the young guy who probably flies better than I do anyway, and roll my seat back. And you reach down, you push your button, little electric seats, they're really comfortable, and you slide your seat back, and you do what? You get a big picture. Then you start to walk through your checklists and the things that you've been trained to do. So over time, that becomes more methodical, and you realize that even if you have, if you will, let's say you have an engine failure on takeoff at V1. An engine failure on takeoff at V1 for us in the aircraft that I fly the A320 and A321, it's not this big, urgent, crazy emergency. There's a yaw just like you would have in the Baron that we have behind us. You stand on the opposite rudder, dead foot, dead engine. You know your basic parameters. And when we do that, we set our trim, and we essentially, well, we do turn on the autopilot, usually in normal procedures, but after that, we don't touch the airplane at all for 1,000 feet. We just let the airplane climb, and you breathe, and you get a chance to just kind of slow down a little bit. Again, get into that metronome moment. And we get to 1,000 feet, and then it's very, very methodical. We call for a certain checklist, then we'll call for another checklist. Some of those checklists are read and do. We read the checklist, we do the checklist. In non-normal procedures, a lot of times it's action, response, response, okay? And by that I mean, one person picks up the checklist, they call out the checklist item, they go to do the checklist item, they'll get a confirmation if it's something that requires a confirmation, and then they'll articulate out of their mouth what's going on when they do the action. So depending on the level of emergency or non-normal situation, there's layers that we use to make it safer.
That's really interesting. One of the things that I find fascinating about this discussion is you're talking about that metronome, right? A lot of people, whenever they come into the Baron, it's the first time flying anything other than a Cessna, right? And basically all of their V-speeds have been multiplied by 1.8 or so.
Almost 2 times.
Almost 2 times.
That's right.
And there's almost this frantic mindset in not even just the non-normal moments, but just in the pattern and things like that.
And that's the same process as any pilot goes through the ranks in getting to that next step. You're going to leave the Baron, you're going to go to a King Air, and the speeds all increase again. And so instead of being caught up with the airplane, you're 3 miles in trail, always trying to catch up with the airplane. The idea is, once you get used to that new normal, get yourself into that thinking of regularity in your non-normal situations.
I love it. That sounds really good. One of the things that, if you are on the channel at all, you hear I'm always saying slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
I love that. I saw it in F1. Cheryl and I watched F1 the movie. If you haven't seen F1 the movie, it's in the plug, but it is. It's a shameless plug for F1 the movie. I thought it was great. But that was part of their whole deal. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. It's never more critical. People think time is just like flying away. And you'd be surprised in a non-normal or in an emergency situation how your time is not going away as fast as you think it is. There's always more time to do what you need to do than you think you have.
That's a really good point. That's awesome. One of the things that I find whenever I'm working with people, they tend to have almost a hesitation or a nervousness to declare an emergency. You've declared an emergency on more than one occasion.
Yes, more than one occasion.
Is there really any reason that there should be a super hesitancy to declare an emergency? I've had people say, if we lose an engine in the Baron, since we can still climb out, is that an emergency? Should I declare?
Okay, if you've lost an engine in any airplane, if you have a single engine airplane and you've lost an engine, it's time to declare an emergency. You cannot, here's what it boils down to. If you cannot normally follow all standard procedures and you have to deviate from any standard procedure whatsoever, it's time to declare an emergency. If there is the threat of something advancing, we have 3, if you will, they're done by color code, but we have green, yellow, and red. I think that's, like if I'm talking with the cabin crew in the back, I give them 3 statuses. We're either green, we're yellow, or we're red. If we're red, what do you think that means?
We're in for a ride.
We're in for a ride. We could, when we get to the ground, they need to be in a code red means that we need to be in a position for brace, brace, brace. We need to be in a position to be at, have the cabin crew be at stations and get ready for an evacuation. That's what a code red would mean. A code yellow is, hey, there's a possibility that things could go wrong. And we have these things in place already in our mind. We're trained over and over again. We go to annual training, we do quarterly distance training over the computer. And as those things happen, they get farther and farther ingrained in our minds, so we have these things set. But there's different levels. And if I'm going to be in code yellow or code red, I can tell you right now, I'm going to be declaring an emergency with ATC. If I'm in the Baron and I can't meet normal performance guidelines because I've lost an engine, if you've lost an engine in any airplane, you can't meet normal action performance guidelines. And if that's the case, you need to be declaring an emergency with ATC. What does that get you?
Gets you priority.
It gets you priority. What do you need in that situation?
You need priority.
You need priority. Once you've declared an emergency, it's the captain's discretion on what he needs to do. And if he needs to deviate from federal aviation regulations, if he needs to deviate from checklists, if he needs to deviate in order to save the aircraft and the life on the aircraft, it's the captain's discretion to do that.
Why don't you tell us a few of the moments that you've had where you've had to use these principles that you've learned in the non-normal situations?
In the non-normal situations. Well, I have had a lot of non-normal situations in airplanes before. Goes back to, well, I mean, and you have to understand, I mean, aircraft and technology has come to the place where those things happen less and less and less, but they still do happen. That's why it's so important to rely on the training that you've had. You have to understand, we're not the first ones to do this. You know, this started a long time ago. And the FARs and the rules and the checklists, it's all written in blood. It's all written because people made mistakes. It's all written because people did things and maybe did the best they could in a bad situation, but we're not the first ones to do this. We're not going to be the first ones to have an engine failure. As far as engine failures go, I've had 7 that I can count. The first one was with your mom.
Really?
At a Redbird Airport, and I had a fuel pump failure. It was actually a dual fuel pump failure. Had my electrical fuel pump, it failed, but the engine fuel pump also failed, and I took off with Mom, and we were leaving Redbird Airport, made a left-hand turn. I was going to take her to dinner. I thought it was a great first date. Well, it turned out to be an exciting first date because I had an engine failure just shortly after takeoff, and again, that was a little bit more of an exciting moment for me because I didn't have a lot of experience. I had enough to where I had bought my own twin engine airplane. I was in a twin Comanche, which is very, very stable. It was a great airplane, but again, I had trained, I had done so much training that it was mixtures, props, throttles, gear up, flaps up, identify, verify, feather, and everything just went. The more you train for something that you think may never happen, the more you do that, and the more often you do that and train like that over and over, when it does happen, it is amazing the muscle memory that you have to just do what you're supposed to do. So when I lost the engine, there it was. It was instantly mixtures, props, throttles, identify, verify, feather, came back around, landed the airplane. Now when I landed the airplane and taxied off and got back to the FBO and then shut everything down, my knees were shaking. That's when you start to decompress from this stuff, and then you have to analyze what happened, what do we need to do, you know, those kinds of things. But in the moment, because we had trained so diligently, it went just as if it was a training flight, just as if I had been there with an MEI, not your mom, and everything ended perfectly. Since that point, I've had many more. I had a double engine failure. That was interesting. Had a double engine failure in a twin engine airplane, a D-18 Beechcraft.
That doesn't leave you with much.
That doesn't leave you with much. And here's another scenario, working with ATC, declaring an emergency, those kinds of things. We had left Dallas. Dallas was 401. I was heading to Fort Smith, Arkansas. It was 401. So, and when I lost the first engine, I was at 9,000 feet and lost the right engine, and I did the same thing. I did mixtures, props, throttles, identify, verify, feathered the airplane. I'm on an IFR flight plan. I'm in a big, old, giant, round engine airplane. Great airplane, loved it. Things that go bump in the night. but it was a daytime flight. It was IFR. I'm talking to center, and it just went back into metronome mode. What's metronome mode? It's what you've trained over and over and over again, so that when the actual experience happens, that's what you do. So talking with ATC, I knew at that point that I was very close to my my home airport, if you will, Durant, Oklahoma. And here's something, jumping out of using Captain's Emergency Authority, I knew the airplane. I knew how heavy the airplane was. I knew I was on one engine and I would not make it to Grayson County to do an ILS. It was impossible. So I made my way towards Durant, Oklahoma, but I knew they had a VOR that was from the opposite direction that wouldn't have gotten me down below 401. And if it's 401 in Dallas and it's 401 in Fort Smith and Durant's on the Red River, what do you think it's going to be?
It's going to be 401.
It's or less, probably 200 and a half is what I'm thinking. So believe it or not, no kidding, there I was. Anyway, so I'm holding my little Garmin GPS 95. For those of you that don't know, it was, I think, Garmin's first aviation GPS. It had a 2-inch green screen, and I built my own RNAV approach in that with under one engine, talking to the controller who's vectoring me towards Durant, Oklahoma. But the incredible part is we get to Durant and I broke out. 5 miles from the airport, boom, it's clear and a million. And I see the airport and I tell the controller, hey, this is good news. I've got the airport in sight, it's VFR, and as I'm speaking, boom, the left engine came apart. What do you know? And it was just like, almost like a little voice on the inside of me that said, just fly the airplane. You don't need engines to fly, do you?
No, you do not.
You just need engines to maintain altitude. Just fly the airplane. No matter what goes on, continue to fly whatever you're attached to, okay? Whatever's going on. And an instructor told me that a long time ago in a 727. Whatever you're still buckled onto, you fly it all the way to the ground. And so I lose the second engine. I tell the controller, I said, you're not going to believe what just happened. He said, what happened? I said, I just lost the second engine. And he said, you're kidding. I said, I don't think it's a good time to be kidding right now. He said, what do you want me to do? Okay, ATC is there to help you. What do you need me to do? And I said, call the Durant Fire Department. I'm coming in from the south, and if I don't make the airport, you tell them I'm going to be within a mile of Durant Airport to the south. So what did the controller do? Got on the telephone, called the Durant Fire Department. They rolled the trucks out to the airport. To where? On the road, just south of the airport, so that they would be there. I came in, went through I could make the story longer, but I don't want to. At the end of the day, what did I do? I landed the airplane with no engines operating, and then taxied off at the midfield taxiway. There were all kinds of, I made a bunch of radio transmissions, so all the students at Southeastern were there, and they all come clamoring around the airplane. And then the guy says, dude, I can't believe you landed that tail dragger in a crosswind like that with no engines. And I turned around and I looked at the windsock and it stuck out like this. And I looked at him and said, I can't believe it either. But how did that happen? It happened because we were constantly training for non-normal situations. We constantly train. So even if you get into that non-normal situation, you just get into that metronome mode. You don't get excited. You don't panic. You tell yourself you have a lot more time than you think you do.
Makes a lot of sense.
It does. It does. Panic is the worst thing that can ever happen to you in an airplane. If you panic, you're going to make mistakes. Any decision you make at an emotionally raised level is going to be a bad decision. So you have to train your mind to stay at an emotionally de-elevated. I don't even know if that's is that a word?
I think it makes sense.
You need to de-elevate. You need to take yourself down off of this emotional high down to a normal level, and you can do that. You have to train yourself to be able to do that, and you do that through training, through regimen, through those kind of things. But when you do that, when you're taking off, and a fuel fitting has broken on your radial engine, you don't know it, and you're pouring about 15 gallons a minute into the exhaust stream of your D-18 Beechcraft, and you go to take off, and you break ground, and the tower says, Beechnut 462, you are on fire. I repeat, sir, you are on fire. What do?
That's the time that you panic, right?
Do you panic? If you panic, it's game over for you, okay? What do? What's the first thing you're going to do if the tower, you just broke ground and they tell you you're on fire? What's the first thing you know you need to do? I looked at runway remaining.
Right.
Okay? I looked at runway remaining, and then I started thinking in my mind, even what's at the end of the runway, because an airplane on fire is a bad thing to be in the air. If you're on fire, where do you need to be?
You need to be on the ground and on the ground quick.
You need to be on the ground and on the ground quick. So I assessed where I was. I looked at different possibilities. Maybe go off this way, maybe go off this way, but I had enough runway remaining. I felt like I could set that airplane down. I also knew I had overrun, and I did not want to be airborne with the airplane on fire.
Yeah.
So at that point, checklist went out the window. Okay, you're beyond checklist now. We pull the throttles back. Now we're going to land the airplane, and everything we do from here on out is you're a test pilot. Okay, and you're going to, at some point, you could be in those kind of situations. What do? You stay calm. You let it just click through one at a time. What happened? Got the airplane down, got it stopped. Once the airplane is stopped and it's shut down and the flame is now shooting 15 feet in the air, now what do? Well, I think I need to get out of the aircraft because the aircraft isn't a real safe place to be. So I run off the side of the wing and turn around and watch the fire department come up and do their thing, and that's another whole story in and of itself. Those guys are, thank you for the firemen that work on our airports, because they do an amazing job. But at the end of the day, as these things happen, and they could happen to you, and as they do, what do you? There's a thing going on with Airbus right now. You've heard about that. Over the last 48 hours, I think there's been a problem. One of those flights was on an airline that I'm very, very well acquainted with, and they were flying back from Cancun, and they had a sudden altitude loss. What do?
Fly the plane.
Fly the airplane. Fly the airplane. I wasn't there. I don't know what they did, but I'm assuming when they realized that it was in an uncontrollable descent from their current position, I'm assuming that they started turning things off that made the airplane do things automatically, because they got the airplane back under control. They declared an emergency. They landed the aircraft. They made the reports, the required reports, and that's all now being used as part of fixing the problem, if you will, or at least finding out and working towards fixing that problem. So how did it happen? How did those people end up getting to this other airport safely? The guys up front have been trained to do what? To get into this metronome moment and just rely on their training, rely on the instincts and the experience they have to dial the airplane down to where they can control it and continue on safely to where you get people back on the ground. That's our job.
That's amazing. When you've been in these twin engine aircraft and you've had engine failures, what kind of pace are you working at?
You'll see for me, and I keep doing this same. It's a slow, methodical pattern. Even if it's not an engine failure, what if you're just on approach into LAX and you're not as stable as you want to? You're coming up on the marker. They were descending you really fast, and so you still got a high descent rate. You don't like what you're just now coming into IFR, because a lot of times, out there you'll be coming into IFR late, and the last 1,000 feet of the approach are in IFR, which is unusual for a lot of private pilots or commercial pilots. But you don't feel comfortable with where you're at. What do? You go around. You just call a go around. So we do a go around. What do? There's procedures, and everything is just, to me, it's a metronome moment. It's just this calm, methodical, let's do the next step. Go around flaps, positive rate, gear up, and it's just one after another. If you begin to panic, you make large movements. For us, it's like this. For some people, unfortunately, they have to do this. It's craziness, but you make these large, giant moments or movements, and they just can create problems for you beyond what you already have.
In addition, one of the things that I say all the time of slow is smooth, smooth is fast, is make small corrections early. We're not looking for this. We're looking for this.
Right.
Early.
Right.
Catch the trend early.
Catch the trend early. And there's some things that'll happen. Some engine failures or situations that are like that aren't really failures. They're failures of another system. We were in a jet stream one time and had a linkage break, a throttle linkage break. And the engine is producing takeoff power, and the airplane, the engine, we can't take it out of takeoff power. So what do we have to do to get that thing to back down?
You have to shut it down.
We have to shut it down, and we have to feather the engine. Again, 2 of us in the cockpit. And there wasn't a system for that. There wasn't a checklist. I already threw my checklist away. There wasn't a checklist for what you do with a throttle that's locked. So now what are we doing now?
You're a test pilot at that point.
And we are, and the captain is saying, here's what we have, do you agree? And the first officer is saying, yes, I agree, or no, I don't agree, which that's a big one. You have to be in agreement. Once the 2 of you are in agreement, do you think we should shut this down? Or maybe the captain might say, I'm going to shut this down, do you concur? But there's always this concurrence. Don't ever forget, as a first officer, you should always speak up, but the captain has final authority, okay? Don't override that authority. There's experience there. There's things, unless you really feel like there's a line being crossed, you work as a team, but the captain has final authority, and you allow the captain that final authority. But you make this decision, which we did in that particular airplane. And what did we have to do? We had to shut the fuel off to that, as if we were doing going through the engine failure procedure, and we shut the fuel off to that. We feathered that engine. We declared the emergency. We came back around and we landed at the airport, and everybody was safe because it was done in coordination. It was done with crew resource management. It was done with as much as you could with checklists, and what couldn't be, you did in concurrence, and then worked with ATC to get yourself back to the airport.
Sometimes I might sound like a broken record on this channel, the amount of times I say slow is smooth, smooth is fast, and I'm sure I drive some of my students nuts with it. But this is why. I've grown up living with this guy, hearing these stories, and slow is smooth, smooth is fast is why I'm here, and he's still here today.
That's right.
So you've got to remember to slow down and fly the plane.
Slow down, fly the plane. And while you're going through this part of it, always be training for that non-normal situation. The more times you do mixtures, props, throttles, gear up, flaps up, identify, verify, feather. How long has it been since I've flown a small airplane?
It's been a minute.
It's been a minute.
It's actually funny. It's a story that I tell a lot of people whenever I'm teaching them the drill, is I want to be able to wake you up at 2 o'clock in the morning and say, run the drill, and you'd be able to do it without thinking about it. And I give the example of I was sitting across from you at a Portobello's, and I was in the middle of my multi-engine training. He hadn't been in a light twin in 20 years. And I said, hey, Dad, run the drill. And what'd you say?
Mixtures, props, throttles, identify, verify, feather. And it was just like that. And it had been 25 years since I'd been back in a general aviation multi-engine airplane, and yet it was there. And that's what you need to do. Train to that level. Train to that level of proficiency. Train to that level of excellence. Nobody's going to be perfect, but be striving for excellence.
And I really want to take a quick moment on that.
Okay.
A lot of people during their commercial time building or their ATP time building, they just go out and do cross country after cross country after cross country, and they just get up to 5,000 feet, stick that sucker on autopilot, and just let it ride. What do you think about that aeronautical experience?
You know, you're gaining experience. You are navigating. I will say that, but that's about it. I can tell you that when I went through my ratings, we joke about this. You did all of your ratings in 5 months, I think almost to the day.
7 check rides, 6 months.
Seven check rides in 6 months. So from the time he started on May the 1st, he did all of his, you did private, instrument, commercial, CFI, double I, commercial multi, and MEI. Is that correct?
That's correct.
It's in 6 months.
Yeah.
Okay. Not that I'm bragging. I'm not. I lived in no, it's really not, because I lived in a different time. You guys now know that. What's it like to get a DPE right now?
It can be a month to 3 month wait.
It can be a month to 3 months wait. When I was ready, okay, and what I did is I flew my 250 hours to get my commercial, but while I was building my 250 hours, I did my instrument, I did my commercial training, I did my CFI training, I did my double I training, I did everything. I did commercial multi. I did all of that flying on my way to 250 hours. And when I got to 250 hours, I called a man. I don't even know if TM Smith is still with us. If he is, I love you. You are an icon. You are a giant. He was a small man. He was so small that the Air Force, the Army Air Corps, turned him down and wouldn't let him fly in World War II. So he went to Canada, and they took him to fly in World War II in mosquito bombers, and he sat on a stack of cushions, literally sat on a stack of cushions in a mosquito bomber, and was a commander in the Canadian Air Corps in World War II. This guy is a living legend. If you're out there and you're his family, you're somewhere down the line, your dad or grandpa or great-grandpa is like one of the most aviation giants that's ever lived. But I called TM Smith up, and I scheduled every check ride and written. At that time, the only way you could do your writtens and get them graded immediately was at American Flyers. So I scheduled like my instrument written, and I scheduled my instrument check ride the next day. And then I scheduled my commercial written the next day, and scheduled my check ride the following day. And then CFI written, CFI check rides. Double I written, double I check ride. And I did those all in 10 days. You can't even do that now. We don't live even in an era where you could do that. And I told TM Smith, I told him, hey, I want to do this. And he was like, wow, sounds good to me. and so I would take the tests, and I'd bring in my graded stuff, and we would sit down. And by the time we went to do the last oral, this is funny. This really is funny. But I sat down to do the last oral, and he goes, I don't I don't even know what more I can ask you. It really was fun. We had such a good time. But we lived in a different era.
That is a different time.
But on that note, if this is your track, if this is what you want to do, the more you fly and the more often you fly, one back to back on another, if you're heading out on a cross country, why wouldn't you be training for SIDS and stars and these things? Why wouldn't you be training for using storm scope and radar? Why wouldn't you be training to do these different things? I know Robbie has got a training syllabus built for people that want to build time, which includes now doing these other things, doing the navigational things that you can, extra things. Instead of just putting it on autopilot and going from point A to point B, you can actually train like an airline pilot would train someone who's going to get on with Envoy, or someone who's going to get on with I don't even know who's out there anymore. I mean, it's
Envoy's
Republic
the one hiring the most right now.
Who is?
Envoy.
Envoy is the one that's hiring the most. So, but what you want is to maximize your time. So, like I worked on all of my ratings for that 250 hours. I worked on every single rating that I needed, and so when I hit 250.3, I sat down with TM Smith and I did all my check rides in 10 days. All of them. You can do the same thing. Once you get that 250 hour mark, you should be doing everything you can and clicking off your squares so that by the time you hit 1500 for your ATP, you've got your cross country requirements, you've got this, you've got that. And when you go to an interview, when you sit down to go in the sim, you're going to have a base level of knowledge and a confidence that nobody else in the room has. That's going to get you hired. That's going to get you to your next step faster than anybody else.
All right, thanks for the plug on the cross-country syllabus.
You've done a great job putting that syllabus together. Why don't you share a little bit of the syllabus, the things that you do on a cross-country flight as opposed to just sitting there with the autopilot on?
Yeah, it really is something neat. So we know that there's a lot of people out there who need PIC multi-time, and we're able to operate the aircraft in a much more economic way when we're at cross-country cruise than we are doing hard engine shutdowns every single flight.
That's right.
So we've put together this package to allow people to come in and do SIDS, do stars on every single flight, landing at Class Charlie and Class Bravo airports, right? We're not trying to find the smallest little non-towered airport to land at, right?
Just because they have a good turkey club.
I mean, I'll go for a good turkey club.
I will too.
I'll show up for the food.
That's right.
But going to these larger airports, getting the more complicated taxi routes, understanding how to read jet charts, right? Our Baron has the G500 that has the jet charts built into the display, and learning how to brief jet charts because you're going to need to do that in your 121 interview.
Promise.
Absolutely. And somewhere along the way, an engine's probably going to be pulled and you're going to have to run the drill. And that's okay. We can restart it in the air.
Right.
But
I was halfway from Dallas Love Field to Fort Smith, Arkansas at 9,000 feet. And what happened? I didn't lose one. I lost two. These things can happen. And so you need to be training for these kind of experiences all the time.
So I really think this is a great way for people to get cross-country, multi-PIC time, but still be gaining experience, not just numbers in a book.
Right, right. It's good. And that's what you need to advance in your career.
Fantastic. Do you have anything else that you'd like to share with people who are just getting into this industry about how to handle these situations before we wrap up?
Well, what I say, especially to someone who's I remember years ago, we're right here with our friend in the hangar with our friend Ray Sawtell, who owns Monarch Air. Ray and I go back a few years. You remember that. I was his second instructor that he hired here at Monarch. And thank God for Ray. What a gift he's been here at Monarch Air. What what a gift Monarch Air has been for the flying community in the Dallas area. It's just been phenomenal. But I remember sitting in a Cessna 152 right outside of Ray's hangar, and I'm sitting there right next to, you know, this other guy, and he, you know, and you're starting to walk through this stuff, and there's such an excitement, you know, and you're trying to figure out how to do this for the first time or do that for the first time, and what you need to do is stay focused, practice a lot. The more you fly, the better you get, period. The more you fly, the more often you fly. I'm trying to say that right. I don't know how, but I would fly, if I could fly twice a day, I'd fly twice a day. If I could fly 3 times a day, I'd fly 3 times a day. But I guess I might be a little bit weird in that. You can only go as far as your money will allow you to go. You can only go as far as your instructor's time will allow you to go. But don't be the one, if you're career track, if you want to get to the airlines, or you want to be flying I don't know, what are the global something, I don't even know what these jets are anymore. I know the Canadair 9,000 whatever thing that goes 8,000 miles across the world. If you want to do this kind of thing, you need to get focused. You just need to fly your tail off and do it as often as possible, because the more you're in there back to back, the more things are going to happen, and you're going to get yourself into a rhythm. You're going to get yourself into a situation where even when things go wrong, you're going to start thinking in that metronome style, and emergencies won't be as you thought they were, that kind of thing.
I love it. Well, again, my name is Robbie Hurst. I'm an MEI out of North Texas Regional Airport.
The greatest MEI out at North, not that I'm opinionated in that, but he really is the greatest MEI at North Texas Regional Airport.
We do all kinds of training, but my favorite kind of training is what we do in this barren right behind us. And if there's anything that I can do to help you in your aviation journey, feel free to reach out anytime. I'm happy to help any way I can. Fly safe.